Right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating today. Psychedelics and their potential for treating PTSD.
Yeah.
You want to know how they could actually rewire the brain to help people overcome trauma, specifically by messing with this thing called fear extinction.
Wow.
Got a mix of scientific studies and reports here.
Okay.
So get ready for some mind-bending neuroscience.
It is a complex area, but the research is really revealing some pretty incredible insights.
Yeah.
To understand how psychedelics might work, we first need to understand what's happening in the brain with PTSD.
So back to basics.
Yeah.
What's going on in the brain of someone with PTSD that makes it so hard to move past a traumatic event?
Well, it's not just about having those bad memories,
Yeah.
It's about how those memories trigger this overwhelming fear response,
Right.
even when the danger is long gone. It's like the brain's alarm system is stuck in the on position.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like your brain is constantly reacting as if the traumatic event is still happening, even if it's in the past.
Exactly. And that's where this whole concept of fear extinction comes in.
Okay.
This is the brain's natural way of learning that a previously threatening stimulus is no longer dangerous.
Right.
But in PTSD, this fear extinction process, it's disrupted, leaving individuals trapped in this cycle of fear and anxiety.
Gotcha. So how do psychedelics fit into all of this? Do they somehow help the brain relearn safety?
Yeah, that's what researchers are really trying to figure out, and they're exploring.
Okay.
Two particular psychedelics are showing some promise in this area, MDMA and psilocybin.
Now, MDMA, that's better known as ecstasy, right?
Yeah.
The party drug. I never would have guessed that that could have some therapeutic potential.
Yeah, it might seem a little surprising, but MDMA has this unique chemical profile that actually makes it quite interesting from a therapeutic perspective. It boosts the levels of serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine in the brain, all at the same time.
Okay, and why is that a big deal? What do those neurotransmitters have to do with PTSD?
Well, all three of those, they play a crucial role in regulating emotions, mood, and how we respond to stress. And some antidepressants even work by targeting these same neurotransmitters.
Right.
Just not all three simultaneously like MDMA does.
So it's like MDMA is hitting a reset button on those key brain chemicals that are, out of whack in PTSD.
You could put it that way, yeah. Now, the other psychedelic we mentioned, psilocybin,
Yeah.
That's the compound found in magic mushrooms. It also primarily acts on the serotonin system,
Okay.
though in a slightly different way than MDMA does.
So serotonin seems to be like the recurring theme here. Is there something specific about serotonin that makes it so important for both PTSD and, the effects of psychedelics?
You've hit on a really crucial point.
Okay.
Research is pointing to a very specific type of serotonin receptor, actually,
Okay.
the 5-HT2A receptor, and it's really important for the actions of psychedelics. This receptor also plays a key role in how our brains process emotional memories, which, directly links to your initial question about fear extinction.
So by acting on this specific serotonin receptor, psychedelics could potentially help change how the brain processes and stores traumatic memories.
Yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
it is remarkable. Studies have shown that blocking this receptor actually eliminates a lot of the psychological effects of psychedelics.
Wow.
That really points to its importance in the whole process.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here, but how do we actually see these changes happening in the brain? Are there ways to visualize what psychedelics are doing?
Oh, absolutely. Brain imaging studies are giving us a pretty good glimpse into these effects.
Okay.
One of the most fascinating findings is that psychedelics seem to disrupt the normal communication patterns between different parts of the brain,
Okay.
particularly those involved in sensory processing and higher level thinking.
So instead of different areas of the brain operating in their usual isolated way, psychedelics are making them communicate more freely.
That's a great way to put it. It's like those usual boundaries and restrictions, they're temporarily lifted,
Okay.
allowing for a more flexible and interconnected flow of information.
And how does this loosening up of brain activity relate to the potential for healing trauma?
Neuroscientists call this increased flexibility plasticity. It basically means that the brain becomes more adaptable and open to change. And this plasticity, it might be crucial in allowing new ways of processing emotions and memories to take hold.
So it's like psychedelics are creating a window of opportunity for the brain to rewire itself in a more beneficial way.
That's a great analogy.
Cool.
Now, to really understand how this rewiring might work for PTSD, we need to zero in on two key areas of the brain: the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, those sound familiar. Tell me more about what these brain regions do and how they're involved in fear and trauma.
The amygdala, you can think of it as the brain's alarm system. It's responsible for rapidly triggering those instinctive fear responses we talked about earlier.
Like when you jump at a sudden loud noise.
Exactly. It's that fast automatic reaction.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, the prefrontal cortex acts more like the brain's control center.
Okay.
It's involved in regulating emotions, making decisions based on logic and context, and basically helping us put the brakes on those automatic fear responses when they're not actually needed.
So it's the prefrontal cortex that steps in and says, hold on, amygdala, let's not overreact here.
Precisely.
Okay.
But in PTSD, the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex is often disrupted.
Right.
The amygdala becomes kind of hyperactive,
Right.
constantly sounding the alarm, while the prefrontal cortex struggles to maintain control.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the control center is being drowned out by the blaring alarm. No wonder people with PTSD feel so overwhelmed.
Right, and this is where the potential of psychedelics comes in. They seem to help restore the balance between these two regions, allowing the prefrontal cortex to, regain control over those fear responses.
So it's not just about dampening down the fear. It's about giving the more rational part of the brain a chance to step in and regulate things more effectively.
Exactly. And that shift in control seems to be really crucial for promoting fear extinction, allowing people to move past the trauma.
This is all incredibly fascinating, and it really starts to paint a picture of how psychedelics could be game changers in treating PTSD.
Yeah.
But if the research is so promising, why did the FDA reject that MDMA treatment for PTSD? I'm a little confused.
I understand the confusion.
Yeah.
The FDA's decision, it was a definite setback for the field of psychedelic medicine. The Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS, had been conducting clinical trials combining MDMA with psychotherapy, and the results were very encouraging.
So what happened? Why was it rejected if the results look good?
Well, FDA approval is a very rigorous process, and setbacks are not uncommon, especially with treatments that are as novel and complex as this.
Right.
It's not necessarily that MDMA is ineffective, but that the FDA might need more data or have specific concerns about the treatment protocol.
So it's more about needing more evidence and, fine-tuning the approach rather than a complete rejection of the whole idea.
Exactly. It's important to remember that this is still a relatively new field of research.
Yeah.
There are many nuances to consider.
That makes sense. It's all about being thorough and responsible, especially when we're talking about something as powerful as psychedelics.
Absolutely. And another crucial aspect of responsible psychedelic therapy is understanding that, the benefits go beyond just the drug itself. The context in which the drug is used is extremely important.
You're talking about the set and setting, right? The person's mindset and the environment they're in.
Precisely. Research is showing that set and setting can dramatically influence the experience and outcomes of psychedelic therapy.
I can see how that makes sense. It's like the difference between watching a scary movie alone in the dark versus watching it with friends and, cracking jokes. The experience is totally different depending on the context.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights just how much the environment and the individual's mindset can impact the therapeutic potential of psychedelics.
So it's not just a matter of taking a pill. It's about creating the right conditions for healing and growth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And this brings us to another important aspect of the psychedelic experience that contributes to its therapeutic potential: the altered states of consciousness that these substances can induce.
Yeah, psychedelics are famous for producing some, pretty wild alterations in perception and awareness. How does that fit into the whole picture of healing trauma?
That's a great question, and it takes us into some really intriguing territory. We'll dive into that more deeply in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into psychedelics and PTSD. Right, and you were saying something about altered states of consciousness that psychedelics can induce.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
It's both fascinating and complex,
Where?
These altered states, they're often described as mystical or spiritual,
Right.
but they can also be understood through neuroscience.
So we can actually see what's happening in the brain during these profound experiences.
To some extent, yes.
Okay.
We know that psychedelics disrupt those usual patterns of communication in the brain,
Yeah.
and this disruption can lead to a temporary loosening of what we call the ego,
Okay.
that sense of self that kind of anchors our experience.
That's really interesting. So the normal boundaries of the self are kind of dissolving
Yeah.
and allowing for like a different kind of awareness to emerge.
Exactly. It's been described as a feeling of interconnectedness with everything around you,
Okay.
a sense of unity with the universe.
That sounds pretty intense. But how does this relate to healing trauma? It seems like a big jump from altered states of consciousness to actually, resolving these deep-seated psychological wounds.
It might seem like a leap, but there's a growing body of research suggesting that these experiences can be profoundly therapeutic.
Okay.
Think of it this way. When we experience trauma, we often build up all these psychological defenses to protect ourselves from further pain.
Right, like a wall around our heart to kind of keep us safe.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And those walls, while they might serve a purpose, they can also prevent us from experiencing the fullness of life. The joy, the connection, the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Psychedelics, by temporarily dismantling those walls, they offer a chance to rebuild them with stronger, healthier materials.
So it's like a controlled demolition followed by a mindful reconstruction.
Yeah.
During that process, difficult emotions and memories might surface.
Right.
But the person has the opportunity to work through them in a new way.
Exactly.
With the support of a therapist.
That's exactly it.
All right.
It's not just about the psychedelic experience itself. It's about what happens afterward.
Right.
How those insights are woven into the fabric of the person's life.
It sounds like a deeply personal and transformative experience.
Yeah.
But not one for the faint of heart. I can imagine it could be pretty overwhelming for some people.
You're right. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
That's why careful preparation, a safe and supportive environment, and the guidance of a trained therapist are all absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
The therapist plays a vital role in helping the individual navigate those challenging emotional waters and integrate the insights gained from the experience.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but I'm still a little wary about the FDA's stance on all of this.
Okay.
If they're hesitant about, MDMA-assisted therapy, how can we be sure that these powerful experiences are actually beneficial and not potentially harmful?
It's a valid concern, and one that researchers are taking very seriously. While the field is still young, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that psychedelics, when used responsibly and in a therapeutic context, can have profound and lasting positive effects on mental health.
So it's not just about the molecule, but about the context in which it's used.
Yes.
The setting, the therapeutic relationship, the integration process, all of those factors come into play.
Exactly. It's the combination of those elements that creates the potential for healing.
One of the sources we have mentions something called meaningfulness of psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
That's another really intriguing aspect of this research.
Okay.
Studies have found that people who find their psychedelic experiences meaningful and insightful are more likely to experience lasting positive changes in their lives.
So it's not just about having, a wild, mind-bending trip.
Right.
It's about making sense of it, connecting it to something larger than yourself, finding the wisdom within the experience.
You've got it. And this is where the role of the therapist becomes so vital.
Right.
They can help the individual process those insights, connect them to their personal struggles, and integrate them into their everyday life.
So far, we've talked a lot about, the individual experience of psychedelics and PTSD. But I'm also curious about the bigger picture, the societal impact.
Okay.
If psychedelics are showing this much promise in treating mental health conditions like PTSD, could they lead to a paradigm shift in how we understand and approach trauma?
Right.
Could they even change the way we think about mental health care as a whole?
Those are big questions and ones that we definitely need to address.
Yeah.
The potential societal implications of psychedelic therapy are significant, and we'll delve into those more deeply after the break.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle those big picture questions
Yeah.
about the societal impact of psychedelics.
Right.
Before we took a break, we were talking about the possibility of a real paradigm shift in how we understand and approach trauma and mental health care.
It's a shift that's already beginning to happen.
Yeah.
And the implications are pretty far-reaching.
Yeah.
For one thing, psychedelics, they could really challenge the traditional view of trauma as a purely psychological or emotional wound.
So instead of thinking of trauma as something that's, all in our heads, you're suggesting that it could be like something more deeply embedded
Yeah.
in our bodies and our nervous systems.
Exactly. What if trauma is also like a physiological phenomenon, something that gets wired into our very biology? If that's the case, then psychedelics, by acting on those fundamental brain networks and neurotransmitters, could offer a way to address trauma at a, more fundamental level.
That's a really interesting perspective, and it makes me think about how PTSD is often treated with pharmaceuticals.
Right.
That target symptoms like anxiety or insomnia, but not necessarily like the root cause of the trauma.
That's a key distinction. While those medications can provide relief, they often act as like a Band-Aid,
Right.
masking that underlying wound.
Okay.
Psychedelics, on the other hand, hold the potential to actually heal that wound, allowing individuals to move beyond simply managing symptoms to truly thriving.
That's a powerful vision.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some challenges to consider.
Of course.
We can't ignore the elephant in the room, the stigma surrounding psychedelics.
Yeah.
These substances have been, demonized for decades, associated with counterculture movements and illicit drug use.
Yeah.
How do we overcome that stigma and integrate these therapies into mainstream healthcare?
It's a significant hurdle.
Okay.
But one that we're starting to, clear as more research emerges demonstrating the therapeutic potential of psychedelics.
Right.
And as more personal stories of healing come to light, public perception is beginning to shift.
I think those personal stories are so powerful. We often hear about the science, but it's the human experiences that really resonate and help break down those preconceived notions.
Absolutely. And those stories are starting to permeate mainstream media as well.
Right.
Which helps normalize the conversation and challenge those, outdated narratives.
And another key factor is the, rigorous scientific research being conducted.
Yes.
Organizations like MAPS, they're setting a high bar for clinical trials.
Right.
Demonstrating the safety and efficacy of these therapies.
That's crucial for, gaining credibility within the medical community and for ensuring that these treatments are integrated responsibly and ethically.
It's not just about clinical trials. It's about educating healthcare providers, therapists, and the general public about the potential benefits and risks of psychedelic therapy.
Exactly.
We need a well-informed and nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
One that acknowledges, both the excitement
Right.
and the caution that these therapies warrant.
I couldn't agree more. Responsible and ethical psychedelic therapy involves careful screening, preparation, and integration.
Okay.
All within a supportive and therapeutic environment.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
Yeah.
We've gone from the molecular level to the societal level.
Right.
And it's clear that psychedelics have the potential to transform our understanding of trauma and mental health.
It's remarkable that these substances, which have been shrouded in stigma and misunderstanding for so long, are now emerging as powerful tools for healing and growth.
It's almost like we're rediscovering ancient wisdom through the lens of modern science.
Perhaps by embracing both the ancient and the modern, we can create a more compassionate and holistic approach to mental health care.
Yeah.
One that recognizes the interconnectedness of our minds, bodies, and spirits.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Listeners, we hope this exploration has left you with a sense of wonder, curiosity, and perhaps even a touch of hope. Remember, the world of psychedelics is vast and complex, and there's always more to discover.
And as we continue to delve deeper into this, fascinating realm, we'll be sure to bring you along for the ride.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.
Yeah, see you next time.